Mama Ngozi clutched Daniel's frail body to her chest, his small frame trembling with every shallow breath he took. His asthma attack had come suddenly too suddenly, and she had rushed him here, barefoot, leaving her food stall unattended, pushing through the crowded streets with nothing but prayers on her lips. "Madam, you must deposit 15,000 before we can administer treatment," the nurse said, barely glancing up from her clipboard. Mama Ngozi's heart dropped. 15,000? Where would she find that kind of money? I don't have that now, but please, just start treating him. I will find the money," she pleaded, her voice shaking. The nurse exhaled, unmoved. "We cannot start treatment without payment, hospital policy. But she's dying." Tears blurred her vision as she looked at Daniel, his lips turning a faint shade of blue. "I will pay. I swear on my life, I will pay. Just help my son." The nurse sighed, finally meeting her eyes. "I'm sorry." The words hit Mama Ngozi like a death sentence. She turned desperately, scanning the waiting area. Maybe someone could help? She clutched strangers' hands, begging for loans, mercy, a miracle, but all she got were pitying stares and cold refusals. By the time she ran back to the reception, Daniel's body had gone still. She fell to her knees as the nurse gently pulled the sheet over his tiny face. A wail tore from her throat, a sound of pure agony, pure loss, pure rage. They had let him die because of money. Money she didn't have. Money that was the difference between life and death in this merciless world. That night, sitting in the corner of her one-room apartment, Daniel's body wrapped in a white cloth beside her, something inside Mama Ngozi snapped. She would never be helpless again. Never. She wiped her tears, her jaw tightening with cold determination. "If it takes selling my soul to make sure my family never suffers again, then so be it." Mama Ngozi adjusted her headscarf under the relentless sun, her hands expertly flipping dodo in the bubbling oil. Her food stall, a modest setup with colorful umbrellas and wooden benches, was a popular spot in the bustling market of Oshodi, Lagos. Despite the sizzling sounds and aromatic allure wafting from her pans, her mind was far from the spices she sprinkled with a practiced hand. At 42, Mama Ngozi was the pillar of her family, holding up the roof of a home shadowed by uncertainty and financial instability. Her husband, Daddy Ngozi, once a vibrant tradesman, had succumbed to the thrills of gambling, believing it a quicker path to riches than the sweat of one's brow. Each night, he returned with empty pockets and a spirit even more hollow, placing the weight of their world squarely on Mama Ngozi's shoulders. Since Daniel died, life hasn't been the same. 17-year-old Ngozi was her pride and joy. Ngozi, named after her mother, possessed a quiet strength and an eagerness to learn, often helping her mother at the stall after school. The family lived in a cramped apartment in a dense neighborhood, where every morning was greeted by the cacophony of honking buses and the chatter of neighbors. Despite the harshness of their reality, Mama Ngozi fought fiercely to provide her children with education, hoping it would be their ticket to a better life, far from the clutches of poverty. However, Daddy Ngozi's addiction to gambling was a dark cloud that loomed over their lives. "Hard work doesn't fill the belly," he often muttered, shuffling cards or clenching lottery tickets that never bore fruit. His philosophy of life, that luck was the only mistress worth courting, had brought them to the brink of ruin. Each evening, as Mama Ngozi counted the day's earnings, her heart sank a little deeper. The money was never enough to cover the rent, school fees, and food. The landlord's frequent knocks became a dreaded rhythm in the soundtrack of their lives. "Just one more week," she would plead, her voice a mixture of defiance and despair. Today was especially hard. The market was buzzing with news of another rent hike, a cruel joke to the many who barely scraped by. As she handed a plate of steaming jollof rice to a regular customer, her smile did not quite reach her eyes. She knew she needed a miracle to keep her family afloat, but where could she possibly find one in this relentless city? Her thoughts were interrupted by Daddy Ngozi's arrival. He slumped into a chair across from her, his eyes avoiding hers. "No luck today," he said, the same old refrain, his voice empty of hope. Mama Ngozi wiped her hands on her apron, her mind racing for solutions. How could she continue to let her family drown in this cycle of despair? It was then that she remembered a piece of old advice. In desperate times, the desperate seek the gods. Perhaps it was time to seek out those gods, or anyone who could offer a glimmer of hope. Little did she know, her search would lead her down a path so dark it could consume all the light she fought so hard to keep burning in their lives. The next morning, under the weight of a sky that seemed to press down on her with the promise of rain, Ngozi made her decision. She set up her food stall, she left it in the capable hands of her assistant, Auntie Bola, and ventured into a part of the city she seldom visited. Her destination was the home of a priest, known locally as Baba Oduja, reputed to possess knowledge of both the spiritual and the occult. Baba Oduja lived at the edge of Lagos, where the city's relentless expansion met with old, forgotten lands. His house was an ancient, crumbling structure, surrounded by wild overgrowth that whispered secrets of the past. As Ngozi approached, the air grew thick, heavy with the scent of incense and something else, something eerie that made her heart throb painfully in her chest. She hesitated at the gate, her resolve waning, but the thought of her children's future, of Daniel's hopeful eyes and Ngozi's quiet determination, steeled her nerves. She pushed open the gate, its hinges groaning in protest, and walked up the path to the front door. Baba Oduja greeted her in the doorway, his eyes piercing through the dim light that seeped out from behind him. "Mama Ngozi, welcome. This one I am seeing you today. I hope all is well," she then replied. "So all can be well. This is why I have come." Baba Oduja paused for a few seconds and then responded, "The spirits tell me many things, but seeing you today wasn't one of them. Please come inside." Inside, the house was draped in shadows, with candles flickering in niches and the walls adorned with various charms and bones. It was a place that spoke of ancient rites and whispered incantations. Mama Ngozi felt a chill run down her spine, but her desperation pushed her forward. Baba Oduja led her to a small room where a single candle lit the space. "Sit," he instructed, pointing to a mat on the floor. As she sat, he began to circle around her, chanting in a language she did not understand. Mama Ngozi perched on the edge, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she gathered her thoughts. "I am here because my family is in crisis," she began, her voice steady despite the tremors of fear. "My husband's gambling has left us in dire straits. We are drowning in debt, and the weight of providing for my children grows heavier each day." Her eyes, filled with the pain of her plight, met Baba Odulaja's unflinching gaze. "I have heard that you possess knowledge that might help those in need." Baba Odulaja listened, nodding slowly. When she finished, he leaned forward, his hands clasped before him. "There are ways to shift the tides of fortune, to bind the luck you seek to your endeavors. But the paths to such power are fraught with peril and require sacrifices that are not easily borne." Mama Ngozi's heart raced at his words. Sacrifice? She pondered the depth of what that might entail, but her desperation pushed her doubts aside. "Tell me," she urged, "what must be done?" Baba Odulaja's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her, assessing her resolve. "There is a ritual," he explained, "that can bind the spirits of fortune to your culinary endeavors, but it requires an offering, a conduit through which the spirits will be appeased and your fortunes altered." "And what is this offering?" Mama Ngozi asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is not a what, but a how," Baba Odulaja replied cryptically. "The water used to cleanse the dead carries the essence of life and transition. If you were to use this water in your cooking, those who eat your food will be bound to you, their fortunes feeding your own." The suggestion struck Mama Ngozi like a cold wave. Use water from the washing of dead bodies. The thought was repulsive, terrifying, yet strangely compelling in its promise of a solution. Seeing her hesitation, Baba Odulaja added, "Consider well, Mama Ngozi. Such decisions are not to be taken lightly, for once you walk this path, there is little hope of return." Mama Ngozi left Baba Odulaja's house with her mind in turmoil, torn between her moral compass and the desperate need to save her family with those chilling words echoing in her ears. Mama Ngozi's walk back to her food stall was a blur of internal turmoil. Every step she took felt heavier than the last, her mind racing with the implications of a Duja proposal. By the time she returned, the bustling market seemed alien, its normalcy a stark contrast to the dark path she was considering. Back at her stall, she watched Auntie Bola serving customers with a bright smile, oblivious to the storm raging inside Mama Ngozi. She forced herself to join in, to laugh and chat as if her entire world wasn't on the brink of turning upside down. But the images of her struggling family, her debt-ridden home, and the palpable despair of their situation weighed on her, a constant reminder of the decision looming over her. That evening, as they sat down for a simple dinner of rice and stew, Mama Ngozi broached the subject with Daddy Nosy. She watched him closely, gauging his reaction as she recounted her visit to Baba Oduja and the unsettling solution he had offered. Daddy Ngozi's initial shock gave way to a pensive silence. He pushed his plate of food aside, lost in thought. Mama Ngozi held her breath, waiting for him to speak. Finally, he looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a complexity of emotions. "It's madness," he began, his voice low. "But what choice do we have?" His words were heavy with resignation. "I've seen too many empty promises in my cards, too many lost bets. Maybe it's time we tried something different." Mama Ngozi felt a chill run down her spine. The agreement between them, spoken aloud, made the pact feel all the more real and terrifying. Yet there was a part of her, a desperate, drowning part, that felt a glimmer of hope. Could this really be the solution to their woes? The next day, Daddy Ngozi took the first step. He went seeking a job at a local mortuary, a job that now took on a sinister new importance. Under the guise of his normal duties, he began diverting small amounts of the water used to wash the bodies, storing it discreetly before bringing it home. Mama Ngozi received the first batch of the water with a sense of dread. That night, under the cover of darkness, she took it to Baba Oduja, who was waiting for her with anticipation. Placing it on an ancient altar surrounded by various occult paraphernalia, he began chanting over it, his voice rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. Mama Ngozi watched, her heart pounding as the room seemed to pulse with power. When the ritual was complete, Baba Femi handed the container back to her. "Use this water in your cooking," he instructed. "The essence of life and death will imbue your food with a charm no one can resist." Mama Ngozi returned home with the enchanted water, feeling as though she was in a trance. The next morning, as she prepared her food for the day, she mixed in the water. As the day progressed, she watched with a mix of horror and fascination as the effects became apparent. Her stall, usually not busy, was now swarmed with customers. People who ate her food seemed unable to stop praising its flavor, coming back for second and third helpings, their eyes glazed with an odd fervor. Word spread quickly, and people began troping into her shop. As the sun set over the bustling market, Mama Ngozi counted her day's earnings, more than she had ever made in a single day. She had crossed a line from which there could be no return, binding her family's fate to the whispers of the dead. The pact was sealed, but at what cost? The weeks that followed saw Mama Ngozi's food stall transform from a local favorite to a city-wide sensation. Her soups had a depth that no other vendor could replicate, her stews a richness that lingered on the palate. Customers came from far and wide, drawn by the tantalizing aromas and the ever-circling rumors of her miraculous culinary skills. With each passing day, the lines at her stall grew longer, the crowd more diverse. Office workers in sleek suits mixed with laborers in dusty overalls, all queuing for a taste of Mama Ngozi's cooking. Her fame brought prosperity. Her once threadbare purse now bulged with cash, and the debts that had once loomed over her family like storm clouds began to dissipate. Yet, as her fortune grew, so did her unease. She noticed changes in her regular customers that unsettled her. Mr. Adekunle, who owned a tailoring shop down the street, began visiting 3 times a day, each time consuming his food with a desperate fervor, as if it were more necessity than nourishment. Even young children tugged at their mothers, whining for another serving of her jollof rice, their eyes wide and pleading. Mama Ngozi watched all this from behind her stall, a silent observer to the obsession she had unwittingly sparked. Her heart was heavy with guilt, but she was super glad she could now afford the basic things in life, and she could see a bright future ahead for her kids. Is it not just water used in washing dead bodies? Everyone will be fine eventually. This was what she told herself whenever guilt crept in. From grass to grace, this was the story of Mama Ngozi. God when, this was the slogan for everyone who envied her success. From under the shadow of sprawling mango trees in Oshodi to a blossomed chain of 5 bustling eateries, each more popular than the last, Mama Ngozi was everyone's prayer point. The latest to open its doors was in Agagage, a bustling neighborhood that thrummed with the energy of street hawkers, commuters, and school children. This new branch was the crown jewel of her empire, boasting not only the best jollof rice in town, but an ambience that promised a brief escape from the chaotic whirl of city life. As business flourished, Mama Ngozi's days became a blur of activity. She traveled between locations, meticulously overseeing operations, training new staff, and ensuring that each dish served was imbued with the secret ingredient that had made her a culinary legend in Lagos. Unbeknownst to the throngs that lined up outside her restaurants, the source of her success. On the other hand, Daddy Ngozi had cemented his position in the mortuary business, initiated as a means to secure a steady and unsuspicious supply of the enchanted water. He opened a mortuary which he named Ngozi's Rest. It was a state-of-the-art facility that offered embalming funeral services. It catered to the elite and the common man alike, providing a level of care that reassured and comforted those grappling with loss. Daddy Ngozi, once a man lost to the whims of chance and gambling, had found a new purpose in this venture. He managed the mortuary with an efficiency that belied his previous life. However, beneath this veneer of service lay a grim underbelly. Hidden from the public eye, in the deepest recesses of the building, were tanks marked Special Reserve. These contained the water used in the final rites of the deceased, collected and stored for Mama Ngozi's exclusive use. The juxtaposition of thriving life at the eateries and the quiet dealings of death at the mortuary created a dichotomy that weighed heavily on Daddy Ngozi's conscience. At night, he would often sit in his office, sipping bitter coffee as he mulled over the empire they had built. It was an empire that stood on the precipice of moral decay, shrouded in secrecy and sustained by a pact that tethered their souls to shadowy realms. Meanwhile, the city buzzed with rumors about the secret to Mama Ngozi's success. Competing chefs and jealous rivals speculated wildly, unable to fathom how her dishes could evoke such devotion and desire. Food critics penned glowing reviews, waxing lyrical about the addictive quality of her cooking, while health enthusiasts tried in vain to decode her recipes. Amid this whirlwind of success and speculation, Mama Ngozi remained ever vigilant. She knew that the true cost of her empire was knowledge too dark for daylight. In all of this, she remembered Baba Oduja's warning. He once told her she and her family must never partake of the food from her kitchens. This rule was the linchpin that held the delicate balance of their existence, a constant reminder that their newfound wealth was laced with peril. As the empire grew, so did the complexity of keeping their secret. Each delivery of the enchanted water, each new branch opened, each plate of jollof rice served was a step further into a web from which there seemed no escape. Yet Mama Ngozi pushed forward, driven by a relentless ambition to provide for her family and secure their future. As the years go by, the shadows of her actions grew longer and darker. Mr. Alex held responsibilities that went beyond the ordinary duties of care and maintenance. As the manager of the mortuary, Ngozi's Rest, it was his task to ensure that each individual who passed through their doors was treated with respect and meticulous attention, from the documentation of their identities to the details surrounding their passing. This protocol was crucial, not only for the dignity of the deceased, but also to maintain the delicate balance of spiritual and mundane affairs that surrounded death. However, when the body of Chief Majikadumi arrived at the mortuary, unusual circumstances led to a rare oversight. Chief Majikadumi, a man of considerable influence and a secretive member of a powerful cult, had passed under mysterious conditions. His death was shrouded in whispers of dark dealings and unfinished business. Typically, such a notable arrival would have been flagged for thorough documentation and special handling, but amidst a particularly busy shift and understaffed night, Alex missed the crucial details of the chief's background. The body was processed, with the usual procedures washed and prepared for burial. The water used, imbued unknowingly with the remnants of incantations and cult rituals from the chief's life, was collected and sent off to Mama Ngozi's restaurant as part of the ongoing covert supply Alex had been managing. This was the water that would find its way into her dishes. From the moment the tainted water touched Mama Ngozi's pots, the fabric of her reality began to fray. The chief, bound by cult rites to find rest only through specific sacred rituals, was inadvertently awakened by the use of the water in cooking. This misuse of the water that washed his body acted as a catalyst, reactivating the residual energies and powers tied to him. In the shadowed corridors of the mortuary where he worked, Mr. Alex had always possessed an uncanny attention to detail that set him apart from his colleagues. Under the watchful eye of Baba Ngozi, he learned more than the mere mechanics of their somber trade. He gained insight into the unusual, almost secretive practices that seemed incongruous with their daily operations. His curiosity became particularly piqued by the reserved storage of certain kegs of water, marked discreetly and isolated from the usual supplies. It wasn't until a stolen snippet of a hushed phone conversation revealed the water's special properties that Alex's interest transformed into a burning obsession. On a quiet evening, when the last echoes of the day's work had faded into the stillness of the mortuary, Alex made his move. With his heart pounding a mix of guilt and thrill, he stealthily filled a small keg with the mysterious water, ensuring everything appeared undisturbed. The following day, Alex arrived at his sister Monier's bustling fast food joint along Ojuelegba Road, carrying the keg with a mischievous grin. Monier, known for her warm hospitality, greeted him, but her smile faltered at the sight of the container. "What's this, Alex?" she asked, a frown knitting her brow as she eyed the keg suspiciously. "It's a gift, Monier. Just a special ingredient I stumbled upon," Alex replied, his grin widening. "Trust me, it will make your dishes the talk of the town." Monier, ever the skeptic, was hesitant. "Alex, you know I pride our food on being genuine. My customers come for the quality, not tricks. But what if this could enhance that quality?" Alex coaxed, leaning casually against the counter. "Just give it a try. What's the harm?" Perhaps it was the hopeful gleam in her brother's eye, or her own hidden desire to see her restaurant thrive further, but Monier relented. She agreed to use the water, but not immediately. Alex persisted. "Just imagine enhancing your already fantastic dishes with this. Try it once. What could possibly go wrong?" Despite Alex's encouragement, Monier resisted. She placed the keg in storage, unwilling to tamper with her successful recipes. Her restaurant thrived on honesty and hard work, and she intended to keep it that way. However, the landscape shifted dramatically when Yummy Fingers, a new and flashy restaurant, opened just a few streets away. It felt like the devil was about to lead her into temptation. Almost overnight, Monier watched in dismay as her once loyal customers were lured away by the allure of novelty and grand opening specials. Her sales dwindled, and the bustling atmosphere of her restaurant grew subdued. As days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted. Monier found herself staring at the keg Alex had left, her resolve weakening. In a moment of desperation, fueled by the sight of empty tables during what should have been a busy lunch hour, she made a decision that would alter the course of her business. Maybe just this once, Monier thought, rationalizing that a little boost might be what she needed to compete with Yummy Fingers. The transformation was immediate and astonishing. With the first use of the water, Monier's dishes took on a new level of flavor that had customers not just returning, but bringing friends. Her restaurant was bustling again, with patrons praising the inexplicable deliciousness of her food. Within just a few days, the pace at Monier's restaurant shifted dramatically. Stocks of ingredients that had been part of a calculated routine of ordering and usage at 4 weeks intervals were depleted in mere days. The shelves in the kitchen, normally well organized and scheduled for restocking every fortnight, were emptied much faster. Monier found herself placing emergency orders with suppliers, scrambling to keep up with the unexpected surge in demand. Each day, as more patrons packed into the restaurant, drawn in by word of mouth about the incredible food, the cycle of preparation and consumption accelerated. It was as if her dishes had become more than just meals. They were an experience that people felt compelled to repeat and share. This unprecedented depletion of food stocks was both a boon and a burden. On one hand, the rapid turnover meant that revenue was higher than it had ever been. On the other, it introduced a new level of stress and complexity to operations that had once been predictable and manageable. Excited and relieved, Monier called Alex, sharing her success. They celebrated, oblivious to the potential consequences of their actions. Driven by the turnaround, Alex began to smuggle more of the water to sustain the newfound success, unaware of the rituals Baba Ngozi performed to safely use the water. As Monier continued to use the untreated, enchanted water, the initial blessing it brought would soon turn into their greatest nightmare, exposing them to risks neither could have anticipated. On one fateful day, the air inside the bustling Agege branch of Mama Ngozi's restaurant was thick with the aroma of spices and fried plantains. The restaurant was alive with the chatter of customers and the clink of cutlery on plates. It was just another busy afternoon until Mama Ngozi's gaze fell upon a corner table where three men sat, their clothes tattered and dusty as if they had traveled a great distance through time and hardship. Mama Ngozi, accustomed to serving a clientele from all walks of life, approached the table with her usual warm smile. However, the men's hollow eyes and solemn expressions gave her pause. "Welcome, sirs," she greeted. "What can I get for you today?" The trio placed their orders quietly, their voices barely above a whisper, asking for dishes that were simple yet oddly specific. Mama Ngozi nodded, making mental notes, and turned to summon her staff. But as she relayed the orders, she noticed her staff's puzzled looks. "Who are you talking about, Ma?" one of her servers asked, glancing towards the empty table. Confusion turned to concern as Mama Ngozi pointed directly at the three patrons, only to realize that no one else could see them. The air around her grew cold, and a shiver ran down her spine. She glanced back at the table. The men were still there, watching her with an eerie patience that unsettled her deeply. Panic clawed at her chest as she excused herself and hurried to the back office, her mind racing with the impossibility of the situation. She picked up her phone and dialed Baba Oduja, her hands trembling as she waited for him to answer. "Baba Oduja," she said, her voice a mix of fear and urgency. "I need your help. There are 3 men in my restaurant. I can only see them. No one else can." Baba Oduja's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the storm of anxiety brewing within Mama Ngozi. "Calm yourself, Ngozi," he advised. "Tell me about these men. What did they want?" Relaying the specific orders they had placed, Mama Ngozi listened as Baba Oduja's breathing grew heavier over the phone. There was a long pause before he spoke again, his tone grave. "Ngozi, you are seeing the spirits of those who have passed but are not at rest. The water you use is what draws them to you." The revelation struck Mama Ngozi like a thunderbolt. The implications of her actions, the water, the secret pact all these years of prosperity, were now summoning ghosts. "What do I do, Baba? How do I get them not to come?" she pleaded, her voice cracking. "There is a ritual," Baba Oduja explained, "but it is not without risk. You must prepare a meal for these spirits, using the same water, and offer it as a peace to them. It is a way to acknowledge their pain. But be warned, this could open a path that might require more of you than just food." Mama Ngozi agreed without hesitation. The cost of her success was becoming too great. That night, after the restaurant closed, Mama Ngozi prepared the meals as instructed. The restaurant was silent, save for the sizzle of oil and the simmering pots. With each dish she prepared, she whispered prayers and apologies, her words a mix of hope and fear. As she set the meals on the table, the 3 spirits appeared once more, their presence filling the room with a palpable sadness. Mama Ngozi stepped back, watching with bated breath as they moved towards the table and began to eat. As they did, their forms slowly became less distinct, fading with each bite, until all that was left was the faint echo of their departure, like a sigh in the wind. Tears streamed down Mama Ngozi's cheeks as she collapsed into a chair, exhausted and relieved. For the first time in a long while, she had begun to question her life choices. She knew this was only the beginning, and what happened next would shock her to her bone marrow. Mama Ngozi recalled a warning a couple of years ago by Baba Oduja. Just after her newfound fame, Mama Ngozi sat in the dimly lit office of her Agage restaurant, the events of the evening replaying in her mind. As she stared at the ledger in front of her, her mind drifted back to a conversation she had tried to forget. Baba Oduja had called with a warning that now felt more urgent than ever. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Startling her, she picked it up and saw Baba Oduja's name on the screen. "Baba Oduja," she answered, her voice cautious. "Is everything all right?" There was a pause on the other end, and when Baba Oduja spoke, his tone was grave. "Mama Ngozi, I have been sensing disturbances in the spiritual realm. The spirits are restless, and their connection to you grows stronger with each passing day." Mama Ngozi's grip tightened on the phone. "The water you use," he said, his voice low and urgent, "it carries the essence of the dead, and its power is not to be taken lightly. You must remember this. No matter what happens, you and your family must never eat the food prepared with that water. Do you understand?" Mama Ngozi was shocked, her mind racing. "I remember you mentioned it during the rituals, but why? What will happen if we do?" Baba Oduja's voice grew even more serious. "If you or your family consume that food, the spirits will claim you, tragedy will strike, and there will be no escape. This is not a warning to be ignored, Mama Ngozi. The consequences will be dire." A chill ran down her spine, and she felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. "I understand, Baba," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll make sure we never touch it." "See that you do," Baba Oduja replied. The call ended, leaving Mama Ngozi in silence. She sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, the weight of Baba Oduja's words pressing down on her. The night was heavy with silence as Mama Ngozi returned home, her steps slow and deliberate, as if the weight of the evening's events had settled into her bones. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. Daddy Ngozi sat at the small dining table, a half-empty bottle of palm wine in front of him, his eyes distant and weary. He looked up as she entered, his expression softening at the sight of her. "You're back late," he said, his voice low, but not unkind. "Everything all right at the restaurant?" Mama Ngozi hesitated at the doorway, her hands clutching the edges of her wrapper. She had rehearsed the words in her mind a dozen times on the walk home, but now, standing before him, they felt inadequate, impossible to say. How could she explain what she had seen? How could she make him understand the terror that had gripped her, the guilt that now gnawed at her soul? "Sit down," Daddy Ngozi said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The irony of his words struck her like a slap, and she let out a shaky laugh, though there was no humor in it. She moved to the table and sat, her hands trembling as she folded them in her lap. For a long moment, she said nothing, staring at the cracks in the wooden table as if they held the answers she sought. "Ngozi," Daddy Ngozi said, his voice firmer now. "What's wrong?" She looked up at him then, her eyes brimming with tears she had been holding back all evening. "I saw them," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I saw the dead." Daddy Ngozi froze, his hand halfway to the bottle of palm wine. He set it down slowly, his brow furrowing as he leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" Mama Ngozi took a deep breath, steadying herself. "At the restaurant today, 3 men came in. They looked ordinary, but something about them was wrong. They ordered food, but when I tried to tell the staff, no one else could see them. They were spirits, ghosts." Daddy Ngozi's face paled, and he leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of disbelief and dread. "Are you sure? Maybe it was just stress. You've been working so hard." "I'm sure," she interrupted, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "They were there, Baba, and they weren't the only ones. Baba Oduja told me. He said the water we've been using, It's drawing them to us. The dead aren't at rest, and they're coming to me because of what we've done." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Daddy Ngozi stared at her, his mind racing as he processed what she had said. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What did Baba Oduja say we should do?" Mama Ngozi recounted the ritual she had performed, the meal she had prepared for the spirits, and how they had faded away after eating. "But it's not over," she added, her voice trembling. "Baba Oduja warned me that this might only be the beginning." Daddy Ngozi exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. For a moment, he looked older than his years, the weight of their choices etched into the lines of his face. Daddy Ngozi nodded slowly, though the doubt in his eyes was unmistakable. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll go see Baba Oduja. Together, we'll figure out what to do next." Mama Ngozi nodded, though the thought of facing Baba Oduja again filled her with dread. She knew there were no easy answers, no simple solutions to the mess they had created. But as she sat there, holding her husband's hand, she felt a glimmer of hope. They had faced hardship before, and they had survived. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That night, as the house settled into the deep, uneasy silence of the early hours, Mama Ngozi's breathing evened out into the rhythm of sleep. But Baba Ngozi lay wide-eyed, her nerves frayed by the day's revelations. Shadows played across the room, cast by the moonlight that slipped through the edges of the curtains. Each creak and whisper of the house seemed amplified, keeping her alert and tense. As the clock ticked closer to the witching hour, a chill crept down Baba Ngozi's spine, an instinctive warning that something was amiss. His eyes, scanning the darkness, froze on a figure standing in the hallway. The figure was eerily motionless, its outline blurred yet unmistakably human. Heart-pounding, Baba Ngozi squinted through the darkness, and as his eyes adjusted, he recognized the features of Chief Magic Odomi. He remembered seeing his body in the mortuary a while back. His presence was both commanding and unsettling. He didn't speak at first, only stared with eyes that seemed to bore into his soul, accusing and cold. Then, the ghostly figure broke the silence, his voice a hollow echo that filled the room. "You have trapped me and used me as a custodian to your labor. I have worked for you and brought you fortunes, and now we have come to collect my wages." Baba Ngozi's voice trembled as terror took root. "I will pay," he managed to whisper, his mind racing with fear and desperation. The spectre of Chief Magic Odomi did not move, his stare unblinking. "You will pay indeed," he continued, his tone foreboding. "Not with money, but with a balance that must be restored. You have disturbed the sacred rest, entangled your fate with those of us who should not walk this earth." As quickly as he appeared, the apparition of Chief Magic Odomi began to fade, dissolving into the shadows from which he had emerged. Left alone, Baba Ngozi's knees gave way as he collapsed to the floor, his body shaking from a mix of fear and cold. Baba Ngozi's knees hit the floor with a dull thud, his body trembling uncontrollably. The room felt colder now, as if the ghostly presence of Chief Magic Odomi had left behind a lingering chill. His mind raced, replaying the chief's words. Asterisk. You have disturbed the sacred rest. Now we have come to collect my wages. Asterisk. The weight of those words pressed down on him, suffocating and inescapable. He tried to call out for Mama Ngozi, but his voice caught in his throat, reduced to a strangled whisper. His hands clawed at the floor, seeking something solid to ground him, but the world around him felt unstable, as though the very fabric of reality had been torn open by the chief's appearance. From the shadows of the hallway, a faint, otherworldly glow began to emanate. Baba Ngozi's breath hitched as he saw a spectral mist creeping toward him, tendrils of light and darkness intertwining like serpents. The mist seemed alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy that made his skin crawl. He tried to scramble backward, but his body refused to obey, paralyzed by fear. The mist enveloped him, and for a moment everything went silent. Then whispers began, hundreds of them, overlapping and indistinct, yet filled with urgency and anger. He couldn't understand the words, but their tone was unmistakable. Accusation, betrayal, and a hunger for retribution. "Number no, please." Baba Ngozi managed to choke out, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know." The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they coalesced into a single deafening voice. It was Chief Majikodumi's voice, but distorted, as though speaking through a veil of pain and rage.
Asterisk. Ignorance is no excuse. You have profited from our suffering. Now you will pay.
Asterisk. The mist tightened around him, and Baba Ngozi felt an icy grip on his chest, as though invisible hands were squeezing the life out of him. He gasped for air, his vision blurring as the room spun around him. Just as he thought he might pass out, the mist suddenly dissipated, leaving him gasping and shivering on the floor. The room was silent again, but the air was heavy with the promise of more to come. Baba Ngozi's mind raced with questions and fears. What would the spirits demand of him and his family? And how could they possibly escape the nightmare they had created? He staggered to his feet, his legs still unsteady, and stumbled toward the bedroom where Mama Ngozi slept. He needed to tell her what had happened, to warn her that the danger was far from over. But as he reached the doorway, he hesitated. She had already been through so much, how could he burden her with this new terror? For a moment, he considered keeping it to himself, trying to find a way to fix things on his own, but deep down, he knew that was impossible. This was no longer just about money or success, it was about survival. They were in this together, and they would have to face whatever came next as a family. Taking a deep breath, Baba Ngozi stepped into the bedroom. Mama Ngozi stirred in her sleep, her face peaceful despite the storm raging around them. He sat down on the edge of the bed, his hand trembling as he reached out to gently shake her awake. "Wake up. We need to talk." Her eyes fluttered open, and she blinked up at him, confusion quickly giving way to concern as she saw the fear etched on his face. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting up and reaching for his hand. "What happened?" Baba Ngozi hesitated, unsure of how to begin. But as he looked into her eyes, he knew there was no easy way to say it. "The ghost. He was here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He came to me," he said. "He said he has come to collect their wages." Mama Ngozi's face paled, and her grip on his hand tightened. "What does that mean?" Baba Ngozi shook his head, his mind still reeling from the encounter. "I don't know," he admitted. "Whatever we've done, whatever we've taken, the spirits are coming for their due." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Then, Mama Ngozi took a deep breath, her expression hardening with resolve. "We'll figure this out," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We'll go to Baba Oduja tomorrow. He'll know what to do." Baba Ngozi nodded, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that even Baba Oduja might not be able to save them this time. The spirits were no longer content to linger in the shadows. They were here, and they were demanding payment. With the morning came a hurried visit to Baba Oduja's shrine. The old priest listened gravely as they recounted the night's terror. Mama Ngozi, her voice laced with urgency, recounted the chilling experience. The ghost of Chief Majikodomi, one of the corpses they used his water, appeared. This time he spoke, demanding what he calls his wages. "We don't know what to do." Baba Ngozi added, his tone filled with worry. "It seems we've deeply offended him by using the waters from his washing. He was a man of considerable influence, and, it seems, involved in secretive cultic practices." Baba Oduja's eyes narrowed, his hands clasped tightly. "This is grave. Let us consult the oracle for guidance." He led them into a dim chamber, where the air was thick with incense and the walls adorned with esoteric symbols. He began the ritual, his chants echoing in the confined space as he slipped into a trance. Minutes that felt like hours passed before Baba Oduja's eyes fluttered open again, his presence seeming larger, almost as if he bore the weight of ancient knowledge. The oracle confirms that Chief Majikodomi was tied to a powerful cult, and his rites of passage were disturbed by the use of the sacred washing water in your restaurant. His spirit is unrestful and seeks to restore balance. Mama Ngozi clasped her hands together, her fear palpable. "Baba, you advised us once to check the backgrounds of the bodies. We failed in this, and now, how do we make amends?" "There is a way, though it's fraught with complexity," Baba Oduja replied. "Soon, the spirits will communicate their exact demands. You must be ready to act swiftly and precisely. For now, preparing a ritual meal might placate him temporarily." "What kind of meal?" Baba Ngozi inquired, ready to take down every word. "Use ingredients that were sacred to his cult, things that have symbolic significance to his beliefs. It's not a solution, but it could buy you time and show your respect for his traditions," Baba Oduja explained. Mama Ngozi nodded, absorbing each instruction. "We'll start on this immediately. Thank you, Baba. We're grateful for your guidance." Baba Oduja waved them off with a stern look. "Be careful. This is only a temporary measure. When the spirits reach out with their demands, you must be prepared to comply fully. The balance of spiritual debts is not to be taken lightly." As they left the dimly lit room, the weight of their responsibility hung heavily upon them. They were playing a game of stakes higher than they ever imagined, walking a tightrope between the spiritual and the mortal. For the next couple of weeks, a tentative peace settled over Mama Ngozi's life and establishments. Business resumed its usual pace, with the restaurants bustling with customers, and the ghostly disturbances that had plagued them seemed to have subsided, at least temporarily. The intense atmosphere of fear that had gripped both Mama Ngozi and Baba Ngozi eased, allowing them to breathe a little easier, believing that perhaps the worst was over. The restaurants thrived as patrons, unaware of the supernatural struggles of the owners, continued to enjoy the meals that had made Mama Ngozi's places favorites in the community. The staff, too, felt the change in the air, moving about their tasks with renewed vigor and smiles that had been absent during the days of hauntings. Mama Ngozi herself spent her days rotating between her restaurants, overseeing operations and ensuring that every dish served maintained the high quality her customers had come to expect. She greeted customers with her customary warm smile, which had returned genuinely now that the shadow of Chief Magicodumi's unrest seemed to have lifted. Baba Ngozi, meanwhile, managed the back-end operations with a newfound respect for the rituals and traditions that Baba Oduja had taught them. She made sure that no corners were cut, no traditions overlooked that could potentially disturb the spiritual balance they had worked so hard to restore. However, beneath the surface of this normalcy, Mama Ngozi carried a cautious vigilance. She remembered all too well the dire warnings of Baba Oduja and knew that the current peace might be just a reprieve. They had performed the necessary rituals, but the promise of a stranger's call, a mysterious harbinger of a more permanent solution to their spiritual entanglement, lingered in her mind. Every phone call, every unexpected visitor made her heart skip, wondering if this was the moment the other shoe would drop. Moreover, the lessons learned from their recent brush with the supernatural had left a lasting impact. Mama Ngozi found herself more attuned to the spiritual energies of her surroundings, more respectful of the rituals and traditions that had been so easily overlooked before. This new awareness brought with it a responsibility she now accepted as part and parcel of her role, not just as a restaurateur but as a keeper of sacred balances. As the weeks rolled by without incident, the family began to hope that maybe, just maybe, they had appeased the disturbed spirit of Chief Magicodumi sufficiently. Perhaps the rituals had been enough to quiet his demands for restitution, or perhaps the awaited stranger was merely a spectre of a threat that would never materialize. With each passing day of normalcy, the tension that had once tightened around their hearts loosened a little more. Yet, in the quiet moments between the rush of customers and the clatter of dishes, in the stillness of night just before sleep claimed her, Mama Ngozi couldn't shake the feeling that this peace was just the calm before another storm. As the calm weeks turned into a month, the anxious anticipation that had gripped Mama Ngozi began to slowly ebb away. Perhaps they had truly managed to quiet the spirits with their diligent observance of the rituals and offerings prescribed by Baba Oduja. This sense of peace allowed them to focus on the upcoming festive season, a crucial time for the restaurant business. Mama Ngozi decided to launch a new menu to draw in the crowds, infusing some of the traditional recipes with new, innovative twists to keep the interest of her regular patrons while attracting new ones. In the midst of this careful optimism, the unexpected happened. One busy afternoon, as the restaurant hummed with the chatter of satisfied customers, Mama Ngozi received a mysterious phone call. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, deep and slightly echoing, as if speaking from a distance. With a curious frown, she answered, her voice echoing slightly in the noisy background. "Hello, Mama Ngozi's kitchen. How may I help you?" The voice on the other end was calm, almost chillingly so. "I would like to place an order for 1,500 plates of your famous jollof rice," the caller stated simply. The magnitude of the order took Mama Ngozi aback. Orders of this size were typically handled with days of advance notice, not over a casual phone call. Yet, the potential revenue from such a large order injected a surge of excitement through her veins. "Of course, we can arrange that. May I ask for the occasion?" she inquired, trying to gauge the nature of the event. "It's for a special gathering," the voice replied, veiling the details with vague ambiguity. Mama Ngozi's mind raced. Baba Oduja's warning about a stranger calling with an unusual request echoed in her thoughts. Could this be the call he foretold? "Could you elaborate on these requirements?" she asked cautiously. The caller detailed a list of ingredients and dishes that chilled Mama Ngozi to the bone. They were the same items used in the rituals to appease Chief Majekadumi. Each dish was to be prepared with precise spiritual significance, echoing the very practices they had used to quiet the angry spirit. Understanding that this was no ordinary catering request, but a continuation of their spiritual journey, Mama Ngozi agreed. "Can you deliver it to the outskirts of the city by tomorrow afternoon?" "Yes, we can make it happen. We'll need a deposit to start the preparation right away," she responded, business acumen overriding her initial hesitation. The caller agreed without a second thought, providing payment details that cleared almost immediately. With the transaction complete, Mama Ngozi rallied her staff, igniting a frenzy of activity as they began preparing the massive order. Mama Ngozi and Baba Ngozi revisited Baba Oduja, informing him of the mysterious request. The old priest nodded gravely, confirming that this was indeed the next step in their spiritual trial. He provided her with protective charms and blessings to ensure she would return safely. However, as the preparations got underway, a nagging doubt began to creep into her mind. Who would order such an amount so casually? And for what kind of gathering was it intended? The lack of details began to gnaw at her, but the rush to meet the deadline pushed these concerns to the back of her mind. The following day, a convoy of Mama Ngozi's delivery vans set out towards a remote location given by the mysterious client. The area was unfamiliar, a secluded part of the city bordered by dense forests, far removed from the usual buzz of Lagos. As they approached the coordinates, the lead driver slowed, signaling to the others. They had arrived, but the site was not what anyone had expected. Instead of a venue, they found themselves at the entrance of an old, forgotten estate, overgrown with weeds and an air of desolation hanging over it. Mama Ngozi, who had decided to oversee the delivery personally, felt a chill run down her spine. The place didn't seem like it could host any event, let alone one requiring 1,500 plates of food. Her apprehension grew as she stepped out of the van, her senses alert to any sign of the event or the mysterious client. Suddenly, the air shifted, becoming cooler, as if the very atmosphere was laden with unspoken secrets. It was then that she saw them figures emerging from the shadows of the estate's dilapidated structures. They moved with an eerie grace, their features obscured, not by masks, but by an unsettling blur that no human could naturally possess. In that moment, the grim realization hit her. The spirits, the restless souls her dealings had once disturbed, were manifesting not out of revenge, but out of a dark invitation she had unwittingly accepted. The order was not just for humans, but a gathering for a spectral one, a feast intended to bridge the realms of the living and the dead. As the figures approached, silent and expectant, Mama Ngozi realized she was standing at a precipice between worlds, her next choices crucial not just for her business, but for her soul's fate as well. The good life she had known was about to be overshadowed by a banquet she could never have anticipated, hosted for guests whose appetites were as mysterious as their origins. Mama Ngozi stood at the center of the spectral assembly, her heart racing as she faced the pivotal moment that would define the remainder of her existence. The air was thick, charged with an energy both terrifying and inexplicable. Her staff, clustered behind her, sensed the oppressive presence but could not see the ghostly figures that now encircled them. Their eyes, wide with fear, sought direction from Mama Ngozi, who had become their unwitting beacon in this supernatural storm. She stepped forward, her voice a tentative whisper that fought against the silence. "I did not understand the full extent of the pact I made," she confessed, her gaze drifting over the blurred faces of the spectral crowd. "But I am here now, and I will honor whatever agreement brought you here." From the ghostly assembly, one figure detached itself and moved towards her. Its presence was more defined than the others, its voice a hollow echo resonating from the depths of the earth. "We are bound to the essence you have used, drawn to the life it once touched. We seek to partake of the feast, not out of malice, but out of unfinished ties to the living realm," it explained, its tone resonant with the neutrality of the neither world. Understanding dawned slowly on Mama Ngozi. The enchanted water she had used in her cooking had inadvertently tied her to these lost souls. Each dish she prepared a beacon, calling them to this liminal space between worlds. Steadying her voice, she asked, "What must I do to resolve these ties?" "The feast you have provided will serve as a parting gesture," the figure replied. "It will release us from the bond that ties us to your realm. But know this, the bond must not be remade." Without hesitation, Mama Ngozi agreed. She turned to her staff, her expression resolute despite the fear that gripped her heart. "Arrange the food as we would for any grand event," she instructed them. The staff moved to set tables and lay out plates under the watchful eyes of their ghostly guests. As the spectral figures began to partake in the feast, a soft light enveloped the area, the glow seemingly lifting the heavy air around them. The staff watched in silent awe, the scene unfolding before them more surreal than anything they had ever imagined. The ghosts, their forms becoming gradually more translucent, seemed to find peace with each bite, their ties to the living realm visibly dissolving. As the last of the light faded, the distinct figure who had spoken earlier turned once more to Mama Ngozi. "You have fulfilled your part, but you cannot leave this feast. Those who see us, who bind us, cannot continue in the living realm." Shock and realization crashed over Mama Ngozi simultaneously. "But I," she began, her protest cut short as an inexplicable force seized her. In an instant, her body crumpled to the ground, life fleeing as swiftly as a snuffed candle. Her spirit, now separated from her body, floated in a daze of confusion and terror. She tried to speak, to plead for forgiveness and a chance to return, but her words fell on deaf ears. Around her, the world of the living carried on, oblivious to the spectral drama that had claimed one of their own. The spirit of the leading ghost addressed her one final time, its voice a fading echo as it prepared to depart.
No one who beholds our presence lives to speak of it, and you, Mama Ngozi, ensnared by your own malevolent greed, will certainly be no exception. You are with us now, beyond the reach of earthly concerns."
Mama Ngozi's spirit, overwhelmed with regret and a haunting solitude, watched helplessly as the spectral figures disappeared, their departure marking the end of the haunting but the beginning of her own eternity in limbo. The feast had ended, the bonds had been severed, but at a cost far greater than she could have ever imagined, and just like that, Mama Ngozi lost everything. The sudden surge in business had been a blessing for Monier, all thanks to the mysterious miracle water her brother Alex had been supplying. Her restaurant along Ojuelegba Road had transformed from a modest local eatery into a bustling hub of activity. Alex had managed to stock her up with enough of the enchanted water to ensure that the dishes kept drawing people back, their cravings seemingly insatiable. However, this sense of success was about to be shaken. It was a particularly busy afternoon when three well-dressed men entered the restaurant. They carried themselves with an air of distinction, and Monier, eager to impress first-time visitors, promptly approached them to take their order. They requested a specific dish that wasn't typically on her menu, but in her eagerness to please, she assured them it would be prepared. Returning to the kitchen, Monier instructed her staff to prepare the special dish, emphasizing the importance of these guests. She watched as the staff nodded and set to work, then headed back to the dining area to inform the guests that their order was being prepared. However, when she approached the staff to check on the progress, she noticed their confused expressions. "Please make sure to serve the guests well. It's their first time here," she reiterated. The staff exchanged puzzled looks before one of them hesitantly spoke up. "Monier, who are you talking about? There's no one sitting at the tables you mentioned." Chills ran down Monier's spine as she turned to point out the guests, but the confusion on her staff's faces deepened. "There's nobody there, Monier. The chairs are empty." Panic surged through her, her heart racing as she walked back to the dining area. To her, the three men were still there, clearly visible and waiting patiently. She could see them, yet her staff insisted the chairs were empty. Was she hallucinating? Were these apparitions? Torn between what she saw and what her staff were telling her, Monier approached the table again, trying to mask her growing fear. "Excuse me." She addressed the air where she saw the men sitting, her voice shaking. "There seems to be a little confusion. Could you please clarify your order once more?" The men looked at her, and one replied with a polite nod, confirming their order as if nothing were amiss. They were real to her, tangible and present, but invisible to everyone else. As she walked back to the kitchen, Monier's mind whirled with terrifying possibilities. Was she seeing ghosts? Had the use of the enchanted water drawn spectral figures to her restaurant? In a state of near panic, she called Alex, her voice barely a whisper as she described the situation. "Alex, I think I'm seeing ghosts in the restaurant. The guests, the staff can't see them, only I can. What have we done with this water?" Alex's silence on the other end of the phone was ominous. After a pause, he finally spoke, his voice low. "Monier, I think you need to stop using the water there, something I need to tell you. He who chooses to dine with the devil must have a really long spoon." Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel to watch more videos like this. The end.